This is the Mad River NKP Railroad Museum in Belleville, Ohio. I'm Darren, and this is the Industrial Revolution. This museum was actually created in 1976, and it was set up as part of the bicentennial celebration. 1976 was a big time for various bicentennial celebrations all over the country here. And this museum was a part of it. It's been growing since. It's a small museum in a way, it's a small town. They do have a lot here though. Let's go ahead and take a look. So when you first walk in, you're met with a replica of the first steam locomotive to operate in this part of the country. It's a wood and plaster replica, obviously not a functional version, a replica of the Sandusky. After President Lincoln died in 1865, his body was sent on a whistle-stop tour with mourners all along the route from Washington, D.C. to Springfield, Illinois, where he was eventually buried. This bell was on the locomotive used for this part of the route. It told mourners on the dark, gloomy night that the president was passing. And everywhere inside are various collections of railroad memorabilia and artifacts. We are right on the main line, in fact, part of the museum. You can see some of the museum cars and the brakes here on the other side of the main line. Some of the old railroad equipment back here. The old switching gear. The switch itself isn't attached here, obviously. One of the interesting things about this museum is you can get into most of the cars and most of the locomotives. Here's a fairly standard caboose. Cabooses served few purposes. They were an office, they were a sleeping area, they were a lookout point. Back when you had coal-fired trains especially, you had to make sure that you didn't light everything on fire, ideally. You'd have people stationed up here looking out these upper windows. You could also look along the length of the train, you're going around curves, and see if there were any, if you had dragging equipment, see if you had any hot bearings. And cabooses all had similar functions. They all had pretty similar setups inside. You had a place to sleep. You had a way to look out. Initially, you were looking across the top. As train cars got taller, looking across the top wasn't as effective. And they started building ways to look out the sides. Here we are as we look out the window here. And remember, normally you'd be able to see out straight in front of you. You would ideally be up above all the train cars, but those cars ahead of us are actually high enough they're blocking the windows, so we're not really able to see on this style caboose. And that's why the side windows came into play. Let's head back down. People think rail travel's dead. It's never been around a major line like this. One of the more modern cabooses. Something common on these is boxes like this. Flags, fuses, torpedoes, hot box coolant. The torpedoes especially are something people don't necessarily know what those are. And these were things that, especially before signals, you would lay out on the track, right on the rail. And when a locomotive comes up behind you, they would then hit those, and they'd be able to hear them in the locomotive and know to stop. You could lay a pattern if you wanted to, and the pattern would tell them what was going on. And here, even though we're on a bit of a curve, you can see from the side window on the cupola, you can get a pretty good view forward along the train. It's not a very good curve here. Take a look on the other side. And here you can get a much better view out along the train here. And you can see pretty much the condition of the train from the caboose here. Take a look at this little black locomotive up here. Really skinny. And you think, what is that for? And why is that there? And there's actually a really great reason for it. This locomotive is a pusher. It could be used in switch yards. It was even more useful if you need to get in beside a train without a locomotive on it and push the cars. So I know what you're thinking. What does this thing actually do? I call it a pusher, and that's really what it does. Most locomotives actually pull cars most of the time rather than pushing them. This one, on the other hand, you see it's very narrow, and it has this. This is what this is the reason this locomotive exists. These heavy bars, and these go straight through, can be pulled out to either side or put in the middle to get through it. And what you'd use this for is if you're moving around a lot of ore cars, moving around a lot of grain cars, especially if you're taking them up a hill and dumping them and you don't have locomotives on them all the time, you could slide this out and it would come out between the cars on the rail next to it. And then you would take this and it would actually move the cars so you could dump them or fill them, whichever you were doing at the time, and use this small locomotive to move a train full of cars without actually needing a locomotive. Locomotive can then come hook up and take them away. So at many railroad museums, especially in areas where it gets cold out, they do have a snowplow. The snowplows typically do not have their own propulsion capabilities. So you would get behind it with a locomotive and push. You have the main plow in the front, and then you have what are called wings out the side. And those extend out on both sides. And those will clear the snow from the sides as well. Over to the left here, we have a railroad crane. These were used for lots of things. Anything from putting a derailed train back on the tracks to helping with construction. Obviously, these are set up for some pretty serious weight. Just checking out the crane equipment itself there, you can see just how heavy this is going to be able to lift. Zoom in up there a little bit on the winch mechanism. The compound pulleys and the fairly serious winch there. This can lift a lot. 400,000 pound capacity. So Industrial Revolution channel, of course, is all about Industrial Revolution and these diesel locomotives kind of outside that realm. Doesn't mean we can't still appreciate them. The museum here does have a mix of both diesel and steam. Full-size diesel electrics here. Got some good-sized ones out here. So some, but not all of these you can get into. So let's take a look in this one. This is a more modern diesel electric here. You see, even from in here, you do not have a great view out the front end of a diesel electric. They did experiment actually with putting the cab right on the front of the diesels. And the problem is two things happened. First thing that happened was if there was an accident, the engineer died. The second thing that happened is the periodic cycling of the ties led to a version of highway hypnosis, and that led to inattention on the part of the engineer, and although you had better visibility, you ended up with higher accident rates. So they moved the cabs back. We have a series of boxcars hooked together, operating as museum buildings. Fan here, of course, because boxcars were not designed in general with the idea of keeping people cool and comfortable inside. China, back when traveling by train was a bit more of a luxury experience than it is today often. The trains played a big part in war effort, transporting troops to the battlefield, transporting troops in many cases just to the shore where they could get on ships. So troop sleeper. So this was World War II, built by the Pullman Company here as well. Obviously would have had beds all the way through here. Another line of boxcars set up for museum space. And there's so many exhibits here. You control the switches on the line. Feedback lights in there, which aren't in there right now. For the most part, an idea of where everything is. So this is a really cool one here. I'm not going to talk too much about it right here, because I have a separate video on it, and go check that out. This is actually a fireless steam locomotive. That's right, it's a steam locomotive and there's no heat source in it. These were especially useful in places where you had very flammable or explosive environments. Also incredibly useful if you were working inside. For example, if you were working inside a mine, if you were working inside a factory moving stuff around. These fireless locomotives were pretty much essential at that point. Again, I have a separate video on that, so go check that out. Links down in the description. I have a side tip ore car here. This would rotate to the side to allow you to dump your ore off the side. Sort of interesting, it's the comparing the different rail sizes. You have all these little electrical insulators here, and there used to be tons and tons of these everywhere. Every railroad had telegraph lines strung along it, and every pole had a few of these on it. So they are relatively available now. They're great collectibles. Again, back up into the more modern locomotive. You get a little better visibility here than you had in some of the earlier ones. Still not completely cab forward, so if somebody like parks a car in front of you, the car's not coming into the cab, which was a problem before. Also, the hood, so to speak, is high enough that you don't run into the highway hypnosis idea. So as you've seen, although the museum's not the biggest railroad museum in the world, they've packed a lot into here. The cars are full of exhibits. They've got some great variety. They've got some unique stuff here too. So if you find yourself in the Belleville area, definitely worth a visit. And even if you don't, this is still the Industrial Revolution. Hey, before you go, I do need your help to keep this channel growing. Easiest thing you can do is just like or subscribe to the video. That tells YouTube, hey, this channel is worth watching. They'll show it to more people. Other thing you can do, completely free, is just leave a comment. More than 2 or 3 words is all it takes, and that counts as YouTube interaction. That's the strongest signal you can send to YouTube to recommend a channel to other people. Beyond that, if you can help out, this channel is actually fairly expensive to run. I usually drive hour, 2 hours, 3 hours each way to get to these sites. So it can get pretty expensive. If you can help out with that, I have a Patreon page over at patreon.com/industrialrevolution. There's monthly memberships over there. Or if you're interested in just a one-time contribution to help out, just hit the super thanks button on this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you at the next one.